lives. Remember that.
Okay, just I'm trying to experiment here. I have to like.
Where are you going? Where are you going?
For choir. Pretty sure.
Good. Jesse has it on. You guys singing?
Let's go out towards the top.
What would you like to say? You want to go sit by Cindy and Oakley? Yeah, go sit by Oakley. See ya. That's the kids. I mean, we could go there by Steve. Well, I think the grade school is going to sit down there at the end. We could sit by Steve and Wyndham. Do that. All right.
You're good. Sorry.
Hey, America.
This was supposed to be my homecoming thing
Yeah.
for America Day, but it came the day after.
Oh, perfect though for
No,
this.
I was like, what am I going to wear? And I was like,
Oh, I know
I had a
exactly what I'm
black
gonna
one. I
wear.
had a black one with a red shirt. I'm like, I was going for something. I was like, still in the back
Oh
of
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
I never got it was nature. It's like, oh, I should have my red pants or something. But
Yeah. When we were little, we lived in. I'm new to it, so I'm not real sure.
You guys need to go.
Hey, we were quiet. Hang on. No. Hey.
What do you see? Go over there.
Did not know that.
does anybody ever ask for your like,
Yeah.
I think you just get it. Just kidding. Hey, look at me. I get to step social play program today. Yeah.
Bo. You're good. Don't be shy. Is this on?
So I think I'm just going to start wearing this and this. And that's right.
Morning, Mike.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Hi.
We miss you, Missy Scholes.
You're gonna be right. You're right, Frederick.
morning.
Morning.
Welcome to the Bertrand Community School Veterans Day program. Please stand to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, led by the preschool and kindergarten students.
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Veterans Day has a long history in our country. Although World War I officially ended on June 28, 1919, with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, fighting between the Allied and Central Powers had stopped 7 months earlier with an armistice on November 11, 1918. For this reason, President Woodrow Wilson announced the commemoration of the first Armistice Day in 1919. Armistice Day was recognized across the United States until 1954, when President Dwight Eisenhower signed a bill that rededicated November 11th as Veterans Day. He said the purpose of this was to encourage Americans to commit themselves to peace and to honor all veterans for their patriotism, courage, and sacrifice. Since then, Veterans Day has been recognized as a national holiday every year. Thank you, veterans, for your service to our country. At this time, please rise and remove cover for the singing of the national anthem by the 7th to 12th grade choir students.
Bertrand is so fortunate to have many veterans with us today. We would like to acknowledge those who are here. When your name is read, please stand or wave as you are able. Ivan Samuelson, Army. Keith Herta, Air Force. Bob Wallander, Army. Matt Johnson, Marine Corps. Don Newton, Army. Gabriel Borges, Army. Gary Mellman, Army. Sandy Bohr, Army. Lynn McFerrin, Air Force. Raymond Nelson, Army. Farrell Schmidt, Army. Thank you, veterans, for your service.
I have the honor and privilege to introduce our guest speaker today. Many of you know her and probably seen her walking the halls here at school. Mrs. Nicole J. LeClaire served in the U.S. Navy for 12 years. Mrs. LeClaire was born in Texas. Mrs. LeClaire got her bachelor's of political science at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. She went on to get her master's in education and administration at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas. She received another master's in political science at UNO and finally received her education specialist certification in Wayne State. Please help me welcome Mrs. Nicole J. LeClaire.
Good morning, students, staff, faculty, members of the Bertrand community, and of course, welcome to our distinguished guests, our United States Armed Service veterans. Before I begin, I would like to take a moment to recognize the preparation and work of Mrs. Burkle and the senior class in putting together today's program. I am so very impressed with your efforts and appreciate all you have done to make today special. I am both honored and humbled that you asked me to speak today, and if I'm honest, I'm a little bit nervous. So please bear with me as I take you through my personal journey. In 1921, an unknown World War I American soldier was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. This site, on a hillside overlooking the Potomac River and the city of Washington, D.C., became the focal point of reverence for America's veterans. Similar ceremonies occurred earlier in England and France, where an unknown soldier was buried in each nation's highest place of honor. In England, Westminster Abbey, and in France, the Arc de Triomphe. These memorial gestures all took place on November 11th, giving universal recognition to the celebrated ending of World War I fighting at 11 a.m. November 11th, 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The day became known as the Armistice Day. If the idealistic hope had been realized that World War I was the war to end all wars, November 11th might still be called Armistice Day. But only a few years after the holiday was proclaimed, war broke out in Europe. 16.5 million Americans took part. 407,000 of them died in service, more than 292,000 in battle. Armistice Day was then changed to honor all veterans, with the first celebration using the term Veterans Day occurring in Birmingham, Alabama in 1947. In 1954, Congress passed the bill that President Eisenhower signed proclaiming November 11th as Veterans Day. This same year, 1954, is where my story begins. My mother, Sally, was born and raised in Saginaw, Michigan. As a child, I used to travel with her to visit my grandparents, and I remember very early on seeing pictures of my mother on the walls of their modest home on the working side of the east side of Saginaw. In more than a few pictures, my mother, at the time of the photos, was only about 18 or 19 years old. She was wearing a khaki-colored wool jacket and skirt and had a funny-looking hat on. Years later, as I became more aware of the world around me, my mother would tell me stories of when she was 5 years old in 1941, sitting in a movie theater learning that the United States had entered World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor. About 13 years later, after that fateful date, my mother, now 18, enlisted in the United States Army and officially became a member of the Women Army Corps, also known as WAC for short. My mother didn't speak much about her Army days, but when she did, she beamed with pride. Usually quite humble and unassuming by nature, my mom didn't hold back when she bragged about her physical fitness and boot camp, her ability to shine her shoes like no other, and most proudly, her being named WAC of the Year in 1955. I suppose you could say Mama was a bit of a trailblazer, yet I had no idea of just how much of one until I became much older. Although proud and boastful of her military service, my mother, who I believe would tell you the same, was just as proud of her ability to find a good Army man, get married, and raise 5 kids. My parents met in Birmingham, Alabama in 1955, and 12 weeks later got married. At the time, women could not serve in the military if they were married, so she honorably separated from service and began her career as a lifelong housewife and the best mother anyone could ever ask for. My dad, quite the honorable man himself, spent the next 24 years on active duty, retiring as a chief warrant officer in the Army in 1978. I was 6 years old. I was born in 1972. Don't do the math. The youngest of 5 children, at William Beaumont Army Medical Center in El Paso, Texas, home of Fort Bliss, the largest Army installation in the world. My sister Christy, more commonly referred to as Mamie, never hesitated to remind me growing up that I was an accident after my father's last tour in Korea. You see, Mamie had been the baby for 6 years at that point and was not too excited that I was about to take her place in the family ranking. My other siblings, not quite as jealous as my sister, were much nicer to me in those years, although not for very long. The 2 oldest, Jeff and Dean, both enlisted in the armed services by the time I was 7 years old. Lisa, my eldest sister, left for the Coast Guard a year later. It was just down to me and Amy, and we had no choice for the next 15 years but to figure out how to get along, and in our young adult years, we actually became inseparably close. In 1990, I graduated 412 out of 446 seniors at Andrus High School, the beast of the Northeast. To say that I was an all-scholar academic would be a gross overstatement. Although I was certainly capable of doing better academically, if I'm honest, I did not much care for school and the drudgery that came along with it. I wouldn't say I was a particularly problematic teenager. I didn't get into much trouble, or at least I didn't get caught often. But putting my nose to the grind and studying was absolutely not a priority of mine. On any given day, I did just enough to stay eligible to cheer and find out where the parties were. And I was pretty good at both. I remember very vividly sitting around with my friends in March of my graduation year discussing what we were all going to do when we graduated in 2 short months. Shelley, my best friend and certainly the most responsible of the group, was going to dental hygiene school. Heidi was going to college at Texas Tech. Stephanie was going to college in East Texas somewhere, and me, well, I had no clue. All I knew was that I did not want to sit in a classroom for another 4 years, and I had no idea what I would do there anyway. By the end of that summer, all of my friends were on their way to adulthood, and me, well, I continued to find the parties. Fast forward 4 years. My friends were now graduating from college. Some were married. Most had moved out of their parents' home and were living on their own. Not me. At the urging of my parents, I enrolled in a local community college and eventually at UTEP. Some of you might be familiar with UTEP, as Nebraska beat them in the first game of the season this year. And I was wearing red. I managed to rack up a total of 15 credits. 15 credits in 4 years. I held down a couple of different minimum wage jobs in the restaurant and hospitality industry, but my biggest financial and personal success came in the form of playing the game of pool. You heard that right. I failed out of college, but boy did I shoot a mean game of pool. I spent some days and most nights earning a living playing in tournaments and hustling unassuming men at the local taverns. It didn't take long for me to establish a reputation amongst the regular pool sharks at the El Paso pool halls, and before I knew it, I was being courted to join leagues throughout the area. By April 1994, I was traveling with a group of semi-pro billiard players from the Panhandle of Texas all the way west to Phoenix, Arizona. I felt I was far on my way to the big league success and had found my calling. Oh, to be 21 and carefree again. Everyone at some point in their lives has a turning point, or an awakening, if you will. For me, this happened on April 10th, 1994. I was sitting at the long breakfast table at my parents' house, counting my earnings from the night before, where I had won a major tournament. My total purse that night was less than $300, but I remember very vividly thinking I had hit the big time. My dad, sitting at the end and the head of the table, peeked up from his newspaper through the top of his glasses and asked, "What are you doing with your life, Nicole? You're a smart, beautiful young lady, yet you have no clue what you're doing and where you're going." And quite honestly, I think at this point he was just ready for me to leave the house. They were very anxious to be empty nesters, and I was not playing along. At that moment, and a little bit frustrated with Dad, I looked him dead in the eye and I responded, "Dad, you don't even know how great I am. A year from now, I will be a multi-millionaire. I'm going to be the next Black Widow, who in 1994 was the greatest female billiard player in the world. Go to Vegas, win a Swiss doubles tournament, and then design my own cue stick." My dad folded up his paper, took his glasses off, called me an idiot, and left the room in disgust. That night, thinking about how disappointed my dad was and realizing that I maybe didn't have a solid plan, I played in what would become my last tournament. That night, this moment was my turning point. I do not recall if I won or lost that night, but what I do remember is that waking up the next morning, my first thought was, I have to get out of here. I suppose I always knew that the military was an option. Both of my parents were veterans. By this time, 3 of the 5 of my parents' children had joined the military. But at this moment, I didn't believe the military was for me. But it was a turning point, and I knew if I was going to get out of El Paso, the military was the quickest ticket to do so. Being from an Army town, and knowing I don't look particularly great in green, I knew the Army and Marines were not in my future. With a brother in the Navy, one in the Army, and a sister in the Coast Guard, I thought I might try my hand and round out the family with the Air Force. I rolled over and grabbed the yellow pages, the young ones don't even have a clue what that is, and looked up the recruiter's number. I dialed the phone anxiously, unsure of what I was doing, and as luck would have it, the recruiter was out to lunch, and I got their answering machine. I was both relieved and sad. So I did what any wayward 21-year-old with no patience and no direction would do. I called the Navy. By 7 o'clock that night, I had enlisted. 2 weeks later, on April 24th, 1994, I got on a plane to Orlando, Florida, and embarked upon what would become the smartest decision I ever made. I wish I could stand up here today and tell you that I joined the military out of pure patriotism and love of country. I wish I could tell you that I knew my entire life I was destined to serve, but I can't. I joined the military to escape, and in doing so, I found my place. I joined the military to get out of my hometown, and in doing so, I found new places to live. I joined the Navy to start over, and in doing so, I got 100 opportunities to end and start again. And finally, I joined to find something I was lacking, and in turn, I found myself. I spent 12 years in the Navy, lived on both coasts in 4 different cities, and I had the chance to visit over 20 countries. I served on 3 ships, the aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, a submarine tender, the USS McKee, and my last ship, a guided missile destroyer, the USS Donald Cook. I spent countless days at sea and shared far too many holidays with shipmates instead of family. I spent the last days of my father's life defending the country after the 9/11 attacks, and I missed both of my daughter's first steps. Yet in spite of all of the sacrifices, I will forever be grateful for the experiences I had, the friendships I made, and the lessons I learned. So many of my life's biggest moments either happened when I was on active duty or have been a product of my service. I learned the value of hard work and overcoming obstacles. I learned that everyone should have something bigger than themselves to believe in. I learned that no matter where you're from or what you believe, at the end of the day, we all want to be loved and for our lives to have meaning. I got to see the world and its people in all its beauty and peace, and I got to live through and in the torment and horror of war. More than anything, I learned that my place and time on this earth is small, but I am able and capable of making a big difference. I am honored to share the title of United States Veteran with all of you. Whether you wore the uniform for a day or for a lifetime, you have done 100% more for your country than 99% of the people in it. And if you are anything like me, you realize you got a lot more from your service than the service got from you. Thank you to all who have served and to all of those who have supported those who serve. Happy Veterans Day.
Veterans are a blessing that we often take for granted. To fully appreciate their service and influence on this country, the senior class was assigned a project to interview a current or retired veteran. This project was insightful and sentimental, not only for the veterans, but also for us. Hearing the true extent of the veteran service should give us, as citizens of the United States, a sense of gratitude and appreciation for this country that comes at a cost that those veterans were willing to pay for. So I hope this video gives you a sense of pride for this country and admiration for these veterans.
He was drafted into the U.S. Army and served as a sergeant for 6 years. One thing I took away from the interview was that he was drafted at age 20, which isn't much older than we are, and served in the Republic of Vietnam. One thing I took away from the interview is that he received 2 Purple Hearts during his time of service. Thank you, Uncle Al, for your service.
Old man, said old man, spend his life living off the land. Dirty hands and clean soul.
We interviewed my grandpa, Dennis Ferguson. Dennis Ferguson was in the Air Force for 80 years.
Dennis Ferguson also traveled halfway around the world, but the biggest takeaway was that he traveled to Germany, which is my favorite country.
My biggest takeaway was his 3-day party involving over 300 people.
My biggest takeaway was when they locked him in a tiny box and threw mustard gas in it. He had to take his gas mask off before he did escape the room. Thank you, Grandpa, for your service.
Thank you, Dennis Ferguson, for your service.
I interviewed my grandpa Campbell. He served in the Army for 2 years from 1966 to 1968. One thing I found interesting is that he drove trucks and worked on and did. While he was on leave, he also traveled across Europe. Thank you for your service.
I interviewed Matt Johnson. He was a Marine for 20 years. I thought that his experience was life-changing for him. It was hard for him at the moment, but he ended up taking a lot away from him. Thank you, Matt, for your service.
We interviewed Brandon Humbler. Brandon has been in the Navy for 19 and a half years and flew the number 5 Blue Angel as a leading solo for 3 years.
One takeaway we got was he would fly for 12 hours, go in on an aircraft carrier, and he'd spend the rest of the night hanging out with his buddies, eating food, playing video games, just kind of hanging out.
Thank you, Brandon, for your service.
We interviewed Mrs. Leclerc.
She served in the Navy for 12 years.
One takeaway from the interview is that she joined because she said she was a hot mess of herself and needed to make something of herself. And she made heavy missiles. Thank you, Mrs. Leclerc.
I interviewed my grandpa, Marvin Schultz. He served in the Army for almost 2 years. One thing I found interesting was that he was stationed at Sandia Base in New Mexico when President John F. Kennedy visited the base in 1962. Thank you, Grandpa, for your service.
I interviewed my Uncle Dale. He served in the Air Force from 1972 to 1977. My favorite part of this interview was when my Uncle Dale talked about evacuating citizens from Vietnam. Thank you, Uncle Dale, for your service.
I interviewed my grandpa. He was drafted into the Army during the Vietnam War and he served for 3 years. One thing that I found interesting were the conditions. My grandpa got food poisoning and said that there were rats roaming around where the sides of plants. Thank you, Grandpa, for your service.
We interviewed my grandpa, Phil Morrison. This Morrison served for a little over 4 years in the Navy and a little over 27 years in the Army. One thing that stood out to me was seeing how hard it was to talk about some of the topics he brought up.
He was one of the top Army recruiters in the U.S. and was stationed in Barney, Vietnam.
What is interesting to me is that he was a crypto logic technician, which was basically his job.
Thank you, Grandpa, for your service.
Thank you, Phil, for your service.
We have one more veteran to acknowledge.
Paul Huggett, who is in the Army. Thank you for your service. Our kindergarten through 6th grade students will now sing God Bless America.
We are now going to recognize the songs that are associated with each branch. Please stand if you are able when your branch's song is played so we can recognize you. Army. Navy. Coast Guard. Air Force. Marine Corps. Veterans, thank you for your service to this country. Your strength, sacrifice, and bravery have not gone unnoticed. Everyone here is so thankful for your commitment to our safety and to our freedom. We are indebted to you and your families fighting for the greater good of our country. The bugling of taps is played in loving memory of military personnel. Please stand as you are able to hear this somber melody. This concludes the 2024 Veterans Day program. We invite all of the veterans to stay and eat lunch with the senior class in the cafeteria following the program. As you are leaving the day, feel free to leave a veteran's name and on the poster. Thank you for coming.